Sterile Billionaire cries and comforts crying toddler on flight, shocked to discover the child is his. He built his fortune on calculated risks, but nothing could have prepared him for the moment a stranger's child looked into his soul and whispered the word that would destroy everything. Daddy. Have you ever built walls so high that you forgot what you were protecting yourself from? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. America's coldest billionaire was about to discover that some truths can't be buried under steel and concrete, especially when they have his eyes and call him daddy. Grant Wexler stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Seattle headquarters, watching the city spread beneath him like conquered territory. At 32, he owned half the tech companies that made the world spin faster. His empire stretched from Silicon Valley to Singapore, built on one simple philosophy. Emotions are expensive, and he couldn't afford them. The boardroom behind him buzzed with nervous energy. 12 executives in $1,000 suits waited for his decision on the succession plan. They needed to know who would inherit his kingdom when he stepped down. The irony wasn't lost on him. They were planning for a legacy he'd never have. Sir, his assistant's voice cut through his thoughts. The board is ready for your input on the heir-apparent discussion. Grant turned from a window, his steel-gray eyes scanning the room with the precision of a predator. These men feared him, respected him, but none of them understood him. They saw wealth and power. They didn't see the hollow space where a heart should beat. There won't be an heir, he said simply. When I'm gone, liquidate everything. Donate it to medical research. The room erupted in whispers. Grant ignored them, his mind drifting back 5 years to a sterile doctor's office in Montana. The car accident that shattered his spine and his future. The diagnosis that crushed his last hope of normalcy. You'll never father children, Mr. Wexler. The damage is too extensive. Those words had set him free. No relationships, no emotional attachments, no vulnerability. He'd built his fortune on that freedom, turned his sterility into strength. But lately, something had been eating at him. A restlessness that money couldn't cure, power couldn't satisfy. He'd catch himself staring at families in airports, wondering what it felt like to have someone run toward you with pure joy instead of calculated interest. The memory hit him like a physical blow: soft brown skin, infectious laughter, morning coffee shared in comfortable silence. Aaliyah, the flight attendant who'd spent 3 months showing him what love could feel like before he got scared and ran. He'd ghosted her completely, changed his number, avoided Miami routes, buried himself in work until the guilt felt manageable. It was better that way. She deserved someone whole, someone who could give her the family she'd whispered about in those stolen dawn moments. Mr. Wexler, the board chair cleared his throat. Perhaps we should table this discussion until you've had time to reconsider? Grant's jaw tightened. What would you do if you discovered that everything you thought was a limitation was actually a lie? Have you ever built walls so high that you forgot what you were protecting yourself from? Grant thought sterility meant freedom. No messy emotions, no unexpected responsibilities. But what happens when the universe has other plans? Drop a comment if you've ever thought you had your life completely figured out, only to have everything change in an instant. There's nothing to reconsider, Grant said, gathering his files. I have a flight to catch. The private jet to Miami was supposed to be another routine business trip. Grant had no idea that in 72 hours, a crying child would shatter every assumption he'd built his empire on. He built his fortune on calculated risks, but nothing could have prepared him for the moment a stranger's child looked into his soul and whispered the word that would destroy everything. Daddy. The Miami heat had been suffocating, another failed acquisition meeting that left Grant more restless than usual. Now, settling in a first class on the red-eye to Chicago, he craved the familiar numbness of altitude and air conditioning. Business class was packed, the usual mix of exhausted travelers and crying babies. Specifically, one crying baby. The sound cut through the cabin like a knife, high-pitched wails that made other passengers shift uncomfortably in their seats. Grant pulled out his noise-canceling headphones, but something stopped him. The cry wasn't just fussing, It was heartbreak, pure and devastating. A black toddler, maybe 4 years old, sat in the seat directly beside him. The child's face was streaked with tears, small hands clutching a worn stuffed elephant. No parent in sight. Where's his guardian? Grant found himself asking the passenger across the aisle. Flight attendant took him from some lady who was bothering other passengers. The man replied with annoyance. Kid's been screaming for 20 minutes. The airplane cabin dimmed to simulate night, but sleep was impossible with the child's heartbroken sobs cutting through the mechanical hum like a knife through silence. Other passengers shot dirty looks their way, a few muttering complaints to passing crew members. Grant stared at the boy, something familiar tugging at his chest. The shape of his eyes, the way he held his mouth when he cried. It was like looking into a funhouse mirror of his own childhood photos. "Hey," Grant said softly, leaning toward the child. "What's wrong, buddy?" The toddler looked up, tears clinging to impossibly long lashes. His eyes, Jesus, those eyes, were the exact shade of gray-green that stared back at Grant from mirrors every morning. The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by hiccuping breaths. "Daddy," the child whispered, reaching small fingers toward Grant's face. The word hit Grant like a physical blow. His hands froze halfway to the boy, heart hammering against his ribs. "I'm not. I don't." "Daddy," the child said again, more certain this time, climbing across the armrest into Grant's lap with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Grant's breath caught. The weight of the small body against his chest felt right in a way that terrified him. Natural, like coming home. "Marcus, baby, what are you doing?" The voice from the aisle made Grant's world tilt off its axis. He looked up to see a flight attendant approaching. Tall, graceful, with curves that filled out the Navy uniform in ways that stirred buried memories. Her face was partially turned away, focused on the child, but Grant knew that walk, that voice, those hands. Have you ever had a moment where a stranger felt familiar? Or something inside you just knew? Tell me about that instant recognition in the comments. As the flight attendant finally approached their row, Grant's breath caught. Those eyes, that walk. 5 years melted away in an instant. Aaliyah, the woman he'd spent one perfect summer with and never called again. The mother of the child calling him daddy. 5 years ago, he walked away from the best thing that ever happened to him. Now, trapped at 30,000 feet, she was walking toward him, and she wasn't alone. "Marcus, come here, baby. Don't bother the man." Aaliyah's voice carried the same musical quality that used to make Grant's chest tight with longing, but now it held sharp edges of exhaustion and barely controlled panic. She reached for the child, Marcus, but the boy clung tighter to Grant's shirt. "No." Marcus pressed his face against Grant's chest. "This is my daddy." The airplane aisle became a corridor of judgment. Every passenger's eyes tracking the drama like spectators at a car crash. Beautiful, terrible, and impossible to ignore. Grant felt their stares, heard the whispered conversations starting behind them. Aaliyah finally looked directly at him, and the impact nearly stopped his heart. She was still beautiful, more beautiful, actually. Motherhood had added softness to her cheekbones, wisdom to her dark eyes. But those eyes held pain now, deep and carefully hidden. Aaliyah. Her name felt rusty on his tongue. "Don't." She reached for Marcus again, her flight attendant training keeping her voice professionally calm despite the chaos in her expression. "Marcus, sweetheart, you need to come with Mama now." "But it's Daddy," Marcus insisted, looking between them with the innocent confusion of a child who couldn't understand why the adults were acting strange. "He looks just like the picture." Grant's stomach dropped. "What picture?" Aaliyah's face went carefully blank. The same expression she'd worn when he'd started pulling away during their last week together. "Professional, detached, safe. Marcus has an active imagination," she said, finally succeeding in lifting the boy from Grant's lap. "I'm sorry he bothered you, sir." "Sir," like they were strangers. Like she hadn't spent 3 months learning every inch of his body, hadn't whispered his name like a prayer in the pre-dawn darkness of her Miami Beach apartment. The memory hit him with devastating clarity, her silhouette against floor-to-ceiling windows, morning light turning her skin golden, coffee cooling forgotten on the nightstand as they got lost in each other again and again. "Aaliyah, we need to talk." "No, we don't." She adjusted Marcus on her hip, the child still reaching toward Grant with grabbing hands. "We need to get through this flight professionally." "Is he?" Grant couldn't finish the question, couldn't voice the possibility that was rewiring his entire understanding of reality. Her silence was answer enough. When turbulence hit, Marcus instinctively reached for Grant's hand instead of clinging to his mother. The gesture was so natural, so automatic, that several passengers noticed. Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears she'd probably been holding back for years. What would you do if you came face to face with someone you'd hurt deeply? How do you handle that moment of reckoning? Share your experience below. "Mama, why are you crying?" Marcus touched Aaliyah's cheek with tiny fingers. "Just tired, baby." When turbulence hit and Marcus reached for Grant's hand instead of his mother's, something shifted in the cabin's atmosphere. Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears she'd held back for 5 years, and Grant realized this wasn't coincidence. This was reckoning. The plane touched down in Chicago, but Grant's world was still in free fall, because some conversations can't happen at 30,000 feet, and some truths demand solid ground. O'Hare's terminal buzzed with travelers rushing toward destinations, but they stood frozen in the current of humanity. 3 people connected by something stronger than blood, more fragile than trust. Grant had followed them off the plane, ignoring his connecting flight to Seattle, driven by a need he couldn't name. Aaliyah clutched Marcus's hand like a lifeline, while the boy stared up at Grant with curious eyes that reflected his own features back at him. The resemblance was impossible to ignore now. The stubborn cowlick, the way he tilted his head when thinking, even the shape of his small hands. "How old is he?" Grant's voice came out rougher than intended. 4. For years, 3 months. Grant's mind did the math automatically. Their summer together. The last night, before he'd gotten scared and run. The morning he left while she was still sleeping, too much of a coward to say goodbye. That summer. "Aaliyah, you have to tell me." "I don't have to tell you anything." Her voice carried 5 years of hurt wrapped in steel. "You made that choice 5 years ago." Marcus tugged on Grant's suit jacket. "Are you really my daddy?" The question hung between them like a live wire. Grant knelt to the boy's eye level, studying the small face that looked like his own baby pictures. "I don't know yet, buddy, but I'd like to find out." Marcus told his preschool class that his daddy lives in the sky. Aaliyah said quietly, I never told him your name, but somehow he knows." Grant's chest tightened. "You tried to contact me. Once, when I found out I was pregnant." Her laugh held no humor. "Your number was disconnected. Your assistant said you were unavailable indefinitely. I got the message. I changed everything after I left Miami. I was trying to what? Pretend I never happened." Fire flashed in her eyes. "Well, congratulations. You succeeded. Until tonight." Marcus wrapped his small arms around Grant's neck with startling trust. "Don't go away again, Daddy." The words hit Grant like a physical blow. This child, his child, every instinct screamed it was true, had been waiting for him, living with the absence Grant had created through cowardice and fear. "I won't," Grant heard himself promise. "Not this time." Aaliyah's eyes went wide with panic. "Don't make promises you can't keep. He's been through enough. So have you." Grant stood slowly, Marcus still clinging to him. "Let me fix this." "Some things can't be fixed with money, Grant." Have you ever kept a secret to protect someone, even when that secret was eating you alive? Sometimes silence feels safer than truth. Share your thoughts on when secrets become necessary. As Aaliyah lifted Marcus from Grant's arms, the little boy dropped something, a small toy airplane. When Grant picked it up, he saw the name written in permanent marker on the wing. Marcus Wexler. His hand shook. She'd given their son his last name. A simple swab of saliva would either confirm his greatest fear or fulfill his deepest dream. But Grant wasn't sure which outcome terrified him more. Grant's Seattle penthouse felt smaller somehow. The skyline no longer a kingdom, but a prison of glass and regret. He'd been staring at the paternity test kit for 3 hours, the simple cotton swabs representing the difference between everything and nothing. His laptop screen glowed with search results. How accurate are paternity tests? Legal rights of biological fathers. Child support calculations. Each link another rabbit hole of possibilities he'd never allowed himself to consider. The private investigator's report lay open beside his keyboard. Aaliyah Williams, 28, Charlotte, North Carolina. Single mother. Works double shifts at the hospital to make ends meet. No father listed on Marcus's birth certificate. The photos were what destroyed him. Marcus at 2, gap-toothed and grinning on a playground. Marcus at 3, serious-faced in a preschool photo that looked exactly like Grant's own childhood pictures. Marcus last month, blowing out 4 candles on a homemade cake while Aaliyah smiled behind him, tired but radiant. 5 years of birthdays. First steps. First words. Bedtime stories. All of it happening while Grant built his empire of isolation, convinced he was protecting himself from exactly this kind of vulnerability. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. Your 2 p.m. is here. Grant ignored it. Nothing mattered except the growing certainty in his gut that his entire identity was built on a lie. If Marcus was his son, and every cell in his body screamed that he was, then the sterility diagnosis that had shaped his adult life was wrong. But how? The memory surfaced like a nightmare. Victoria's face when he'd ended their engagement 6 months before the accident. Her eyes had gone cold, calculating. If I can't have you, no one else will. At the time, he thought she meant she'd make dating difficult, spread rumors in their social circle. He'd never imagined she'd go further. Grant's hands shook as he reached for his phone, dialing the number from memory. Dr. Richardson's office. This is Grant Wexler. I need to speak with Dr. Richardson about my file from 5 years ago. Immediately. I'm sorry, Mr. Wexler, but Dr. Richardson retired 2 years ago. His practice was sold. Then I need copies of my medical records. All of them. Sir, I'll need to verify your identity and whatever it costs, whatever authorization you need. I'll have my lawyers handle it. Grant's voice carried the authority that had built his empire. I need those records today. What would you do if you discovered you might be a parent to a child you never knew existed? Would you pursue the truth or let the past stay buried? Tell me in the comments. The private investigator's report landed on his desk with devastating precision. Aaliyah Williams, 28, Charlotte, North Carolina. Single mother. No father listed on birth certificate. But the final line made his blood freeze. Subject recently diagnosed with lupus, requiring expensive, ongoing treatment. Grant's private jet touched down in Charlotte at 11 p.m. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. The drive to Aaliyah's apartment felt like a funeral march. Every mile reminded him of what he'd thrown away 5 years ago. Back then, he was 28, ruthless, and convinced that love was just another business transaction that ended badly. Have you ever hurt someone so deeply that facing them again feels impossible? That's where Grant was now. Her neighborhood wasn't what he expected. Tree-lined streets, kids playing basketball under streetlights, music drifting from front porches. This was home, real home, not the sterile penthouse he called living. Grant parked outside her building and sat there for 20 minutes. Through her second-floor window, he could see shadows moving. Marcus was probably asleep. His son. The words still felt foreign. When Aaliyah finally opened the door, she looked exhausted. Beautiful, but worn down by years of carrying weight that should have been shared. You came, she whispered. Of course I came. She stepped aside, and he entered her world. Photos of Marcus covered every surface. First steps, birthdays, school pictures. Grant's chest tightened. He missed everything. He's sleeping, Aaliyah said. Doctor said he needs rest after yesterday's excitement. They sat on her couch, the same distance apart they'd maintained on the plane. But this time, the space between them hummed with 5 years of unfinished business. Why didn't you tell me? Grant's voice cracked. When you found out you were pregnant, why didn't you call? Aaliyah's eyes flashed. Call you? Grant, you left me a voicemail. One voicemail. Thanks for the summer, but I'm focusing on my career now. Click. That was it. The memory hit him like a punch. He'd been 28 and terrified. She was supposed to be temporary, but 3 months with her had felt more real than anything in his carefully controlled life. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared of what? Me? Or the fact that you actually felt something?" Before he could answer, Marcus appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy, who's the man?" Grant's breath caught. Even sleepy and confused, Marcus looked exactly like Grant had at that age. Same stubborn jawline, same questioning eyes. "This is Grant, baby. Remember from the airplane?" Marcus studied Grant with that intense, focused children have when they're trying to solve a puzzle. Then he walked over and climbed onto the couch between them. "Are you staying for breakfast?" Marcus asked. Grant looked at Aaliyah. Her expression was unreadable, but she nodded slightly. "If your mom says it's okay. She makes the best pancakes," Marcus announced, then curled up against Grant's side like it was the most natural thing in the world. Over Marcus's head, Grant and Aaliyah's eyes met. The anger was still there, but something else was building underneath. Something that felt dangerously like the way they used to look at each other during those summer nights when the world disappeared and only they existed. But now they had Marcus. Everything was different. Everything was more complicated. "Grant," Aaliyah said softly, "we need to talk. About the paternity test. About what happens next." He nodded, feeling Marcus's warm weight against his chest. "Tomorrow, after we know for sure." But deep down, Grant already knew. This little boy was his son. The question was, what was he going to do about it? The paternity test results arrived at 2 p.m. the next day. Grant stared at the lab report in his hands, his entire world shifting on its axis. 99.7% probability of paternity. Marcus was his son. Definitively, scientifically, undeniably his. Aaliyah watched him read, her arms crossed, waiting for his reaction. They were sitting at her kitchen table while Marcus napped in the other room. "So now you know," she said. "What are you going to do about it?" Grant set the paper down carefully. "I want to be his father. Really be his father. Not just send checks. It's not that simple, Grant. You can't just walk in here and rearrange our lives because you feel guilty. This isn't about guilt, isn't it?" Aaliyah stood up, pacing to the window. 5 years, Grant. 5 years I've done this alone. Doctor visits, sleepless nights, parent-teacher conferences, birthday parties where other kids asked where his daddy was. Her voice broke on the last word, and Grant felt something crack in his chest. "I know I messed up, Dash. Messed up." She whirled around. "You didn't mess up. You abandoned me. There's a difference." The accusation hung between them like a blade. Grant wanted to defend himself, to explain about his fear and his business and all the reasons he'd convinced himself that leaving was the right choice. But looking at her now, really looking at her, he saw what his absence had cost. The exhaustion in her eyes, the way she held herself like she was ready to fight the world alone, the brittleness that hadn't been there during their summer together. "You're right," he said quietly. "I abandoned you, both of you, and I'm sorry isn't enough." Aaliyah's shoulders sagged. "Sorry doesn't change anything. What if I moved here? To Charlotte?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You? Leave Seattle? Leave your empire? Marcus is more important than any business. Is he? Or is this just another project for you to manage and control?" The question cut deep because part of him wondered the same thing. Was this real? Or was he just trying to fix a problem the way he fixed everything else, with money and power and relentless determination? Before he could answer, Marcus appeared in the doorway, hair messy from his nap. "Why are you guys talking loud?" he asked, looking between them with worried eyes. Aaliyah knelt down to his level. "We're just having a grown-up conversation, baby. Are you mad at Grant?" The innocence in the question nearly broke Grant. Here was his son, already trying to protect him from his mother's anger. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things," Aaliyah said carefully. "But that doesn't mean anyone's in trouble." Marcus considered this, then walked over to Grant. "Do you want to see my room?" Grant glanced at Aaliyah, who nodded reluctantly. Marcus's room was a wonderland of toys, books, and artwork. But what caught Grant's attention was a drawing taped to the wall. A stick-figure family with a mom, a little boy, and an empty space where the dad should be. "Who's this?" Grant asked, pointing to the space. "That's for when my daddy comes home," Marcus said matter-of-factly. Mommy says he's busy, but he'll come back someday. Grant's throat constricted. He knelt down to Marcus's eye level. What if I told you that I might be your daddy? Marcus's eyes went wide. Really? Would that be okay with you? Marcus threw his arms around Grant's neck. I've been waiting for you forever. Over Marcus's shoulder, Grant saw Aaliyah standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Everything was about to change, but was change enough to heal what he'd broken? I need to know the truth about my medical records. Grant's call to his former doctor in Montana came at 6 a.m. the next morning. He was standing on Aaliyah's balcony, watching Charlotte wake up while she and Marcus slept inside. Dr. Richardson's voice was cautious. Grant, it's been years. What's this about? The accident in 2018. You told me I was sterile, completely sterile, but I just found out I have a 4-year-old son. Silence stretched across the line. Dr. Richardson? That's impossible. The tests were definitive. Were they? Or is there something you're not telling me? Another pause. Too long. Too careful. Grant, I think you should come in. We need to discuss this in person. The flight to Montana took 3 hours. Grant spent every minute of it thinking about Victoria Ashworth, his ex-fiancée. She'd been there during his recovery, holding his hand when Dr. Richardson delivered the devastating news about his fertility. She'd been so supportive, so understanding, so quick to suggest they could still have a future together without children. Now, Grant wondered if her support had been performance. Dr. Richardson's office looked exactly the same, sterile, professional, intimidating. But the doctor himself looked older, more nervous. Before we start, Grant said, I want you to know that if you lie to me, I'll destroy your practice and your reputation. Are we clear? Dr. Richardson swallowed hard. Grant, what I'm about to tell you, it could ruin lives. Lives are already ruined. Talk. The story came out in pieces. Victoria had approached Dr. Richardson 6 months after Grant's accident. She'd been charming, persuasive, and very generous with her donations to the hospital's research wing. She said she was trying to protect you from making a mistake, Dr. Richardson said, that you had a tendency to get involved with inappropriate women. She wanted to ensure you wouldn't father children with someone beneath your social status. Grant's vision went red. You falsified my medical records because my fiancé paid you to? The original test showed reduced fertility, not complete sterility. But she convinced me that it was kinder to tell you there was no hope at all. That way, you wouldn't waste time trying to have children with women who were only after your money. And you believe that? She was very convincing and very generous. Grant stood up so fast his chair toppled over. Do you have any idea what you've done? I have a son I never knew existed. A woman I abandoned because I thought I couldn't give her a family. I am sorry. Sorry. Grant leaned across the desk. You destroyed lives for money. My son grew up without a father because you were too greedy to tell the truth. Dr. Richardson was visibly shaking now. Victoria said if the truth ever came out, she'd make sure I lost my license anyway. I was trapped. No, you were bought. Grant pulled out his phone and started recording. I want you to say it again. All of it. On record. Grant, please dash. Say it, or I'll have you arrested for fraud and malpractice. The confession took 20 minutes. When it was over, Grant had everything he needed to destroy Victoria Ashworth and everyone who'd helped her. But first, he had to get back to Charlotte. He had to tell Aaliyah the truth. On the plane back, Grant's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know you've been digging into old medical records. Some truths are better buried. Back off, or your new little family will pay the price. Vizgichka. Victoria knew he was onto her, and now she was threatening Marcus and Aaliyah. This was war. Grant's hands shook as he forwarded Victoria's threat to his head of security. 5 years ago, he would have handled this through lawyers and board meetings. Now, with Marcus and Aaliyah in danger, every instinct screamed for immediate action. But first, he had to warn them. Aaliyah answered her phone on the second ring. Grant? What's wrong? Where are you and Marcus right now? At home. Why? You sound dash. Pack a bag. Both of you. My security team is 10 minutes out. Grant, you're scaring me. He was standing in his Seattle office, staring out at the skyline he'd conquered, realizing none of it mattered if he lost them. Victoria knows about Marcus. She's threatening you both. Silence. Then, who's Victoria? My ex-fiancée, the one who destroyed my medical records. She's dangerous, Aaliyah. Please, just trust me. You want me to uproot my son because of some woman from your past? She's not just some woman. She's obsessed, and she has resources. Through the phone, he heard Marcus in the background asking if they were going on an adventure. Grant, I can't just disappear. I have a job. Marcus has school dash. I'll handle all of that. But right now, I need you safe. And where exactly is safe? Your penthouse in Seattle? The same city where this crazy woman lives. He'd already thought of that. My ranch in Wyoming. It's remote, secure. She'll never find you there. Wyoming. Aaliyah's voice rose. Grant, listen to yourself. You're asking me to run away with you to Wyoming because your ex-girlfriend is upset that you have a son? When she put it like that, it sounded insane. But Victoria wasn't just upset. She was calculating, ruthless, and had already proven she'd destroy lives to get what she wanted. Aaliyah, 5 years ago, she paid a doctor to lie about my fertility so I wouldn't have children with anyone but her. What do you think she'll do now that she knows about Marcus? The line went quiet. In the background, he could hear Marcus playing with his toys, completely unaware that his existence had made him a target. How long? Aaliyah finally asked. Just until I can handle her legally. A few weeks, maybe a month. And my job, I'll pay your salary. Triple it. This isn't about money, Grant. I know. It's about keeping our son safe. Our son. Asterisk, the words hung between them. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. Claimed Marcus as theirs together. Okay, she whispered. But Grant? If this is some elaborate scheme to control us, Dash. It's not. Because if you're lying, if this is just a way to manipulate us into your world, I'll disappear with Marcus and you'll never find us. I understand. Do you? Because I've built a life here. Friends, community, stability. Marcus has never been anywhere but Charlotte. You're asking us to give up everything because you can't handle your past. She was right. He was asking them to sacrifice their world for his mistakes. But what choice did he have? My security team will explain everything, he said. And Aaliyah, I'm flying down tonight. We'll figure this out together. Together, she repeated, like she was testing how the word felt. Grant ended the call and immediately dialed his lawyer. Victoria wanted to play games? Game on. Hashtag Chapter 10. Secrets and Southern Comfort. 540 words, asterisk. The ranch in Wyoming was nothing like Aaliyah expected. She'd imagined something cold and intimidating, like Grant's penthouse. Instead, she found a warm log cabin surrounded by endless mountains, with a wraparound porch and wildflowers growing everywhere. It's beautiful, she admitted as Grant carried their bags inside. Marcus was already running around the property, chasing butterflies and marveling at the horses in the distance. For a kid who'd never left Charlotte, this was pure magic. My grandfather built this place, Grant said. Before I became what I became, there was something different about him here. Less rigid, more human. That night, after Marcus fell asleep in the guest room, Grant and Aaliyah sat on the porch drinking wine and watching the stars. The silence between them wasn't angry anymore. It was heavy with things they needed to say, but didn't know how to start. Tell me about Victoria, Aaliyah finally said. Grant was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. We met at a charity gala. She was everything I thought I wanted, sophisticated, connected, ambitious. She understood my world. Did you love her? Another pause. I thought I did. But looking back, I think I love the idea of her. The perfect match on paper. What happened? She wanted to get married immediately after my accident. Said it didn't matter that I couldn't have children, that we'd be enough for each other. Grant's laugh was bitter. I should have known something was wrong. Victoria always wanted children. Talked about it constantly before the accident. Aaliyah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. She orchestrated the whole thing. From the beginning, the accident wasn't her fault, but everything after, she saw an opportunity and took it. Why? What did she gain from keeping you sterile? Grant stared out at the mountains. Control. If I couldn't have biological children, I'd never leave her for someone who could give me a family. The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. Aaliyah thought about all the nights she'd wondered why Grant abandoned her, all the times she questioned if she'd meant anything to him at all. "She stole 5 years from us," Aaliyah whispered. "Yeah, she did." Grant turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, she saw the man she'd fallen for that summer. Not the billionaire, not the Ice King of Seattle, just Grant. Broken, guilty, but trying to fix what he could. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She nodded. "That summer we had together, was it real for you? Or was I just what? A rich guy who was fun for a few months?" Aaliyah set down her wine glass and faced him fully. "Grant, I was 23 years old. I'd never been anywhere, never met anyone like you. But what we had, it wasn't about your money. What was it about?" She remembered those nights in her tiny apartment. How he'd show up after 18-hour workdays just to hold her. How he'd listen to her dreams about becoming a nurse, never once suggesting she wasn't smart enough or ambitious enough. "You made me feel seen," she said. "Like I mattered. You did matter. You still do." The words hung between them, full of possibility and danger. Because despite everything, the abandonment, the lies, the years of pain, she was still drawn to him. And that terrified her more than Victoria ever could. The attack came at dawn. Grant woke to the sound of Marcus screaming. He bolted from his bed and ran to the guest room, where he found Aaliyah holding their son, both of them staring out the window in terror. A black SUV was parked at the end of the driveway. Two men in dark suits stood beside it, watching the house. "How did they find us?" Aaliyah whispered. Grant's jaw tightened. "Victoria has connections everywhere." His phone buzzed with a text. Asterisk, beautiful property. Shame if something happened to it. You have 1 hour to call me. Vizgichka. Pack everything. Now. Grant was already moving, grabbing clothes and shoving them into bags. "Where are we going to go?" Aaliyah asked, trying to keep the panic out of her voice for Marcus's sake. "My lawyer's office. Downtown Denver. She can't touch us there." But as they loaded the car, Grant noticed something that made his blood freeze. One of the men was holding a long-range camera, taking pictures of Marcus. She wasn't just threatening them. She was documenting their son. The drive to Denver was tense and silent. Marcus fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the fear and confusion. Aaliyah kept checking the mirrors, watching for cars that might be following them. "Grant," she said quietly, "what exactly is Victoria capable of?" He thought about the medical fraud, the years of manipulation, the calculated cruelty of stealing his chance at fatherhood. "Anything," he said. "She's capable of anything." At the lawyer's office, Grant's attorney, Patricia Wong, laid out the situation with brutal honesty. "The medical fraud is prosecutable," she said. "Dr. Richardson's confession gives us everything we need. But Victoria's smart. She'll claim she was protecting you from gold diggers, that her intentions were good. And the threats?" Aaliyah asked. "Harder to prove. Text messages can be explained away." Grant slammed his hand on the conference table. "So she gets away with it?" "Not necessarily. But we need more evidence. Something that shows a pattern of obsessive behavior." That's when Aaliyah spoke up. "What if we give her what she wants?" Both Grant and Patricia stared at her. "She wants Grant, right? What if we make her think she's one?" "Absolutely not," Grant said immediately. "Listen to me. She's obsessed with you, which means she's emotional, not logical. Emotional people make mistakes." Patricia leaned forward, intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" "Grant breaks up with me, publicly. Says he realizes Marcus isn't worth giving up his empire for. That he's choosing his old life over us." "Aaliyah, no." Grant's voice was firm. "I won't pretend to abandon you again. I won't put you through that. It's just pretend. It was pretend last time, too. Look how that ended." She reached across the table and took his hand. "This is different. This time, I know you're coming back." The trust in her voice nearly broke him. After everything he'd done, everything he'd put her through, she was willing to sacrifice her heart again to protect their family. "There has to be another way," he said. "There is," Patricia said quietly. "But it's dangerous." They both looked at her. "We wire Grant. He meets with Victoria, gets her to confess on tape. But if she realizes what's happening, she'll destroy everything," Grant finished. "Maybe. Or maybe she'll finally reveal just how far she's willing to go. Grant looked at Aaliyah, then at Marcus sleeping peacefully in the corner of the office, trusting that the adults would keep him safe. Sometimes protecting the people you love meant risking everything. Set up the meeting. The meeting was set for Victoria's penthouse in Seattle. Neutral ground, she'd insisted, though nothing about Victoria Ashworth was neutral. Grant wore a wire so thin it was invisible. Patricia and her team monitored from a van parked 3 blocks away. Aaliyah and Marcus were safe in a hotel across town, protected by Grant's security team. But as the elevator climbed to the 42nd floor, Grant felt like he was ascending to his own execution. Victoria answered the door herself, looking exactly as he remembered, blonde, polished, predatory. But there was something different in her eyes now, something desperate. "Grant," she purred, stepping aside to let him in. "I've missed you." Her penthouse was a monument to wealth and control. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and every piece of furniture was positioned for maximum psychological impact. "Cut the act, Victoria. We both know why I'm here." She laughed, moving to the bar to pour herself a drink. "Do we?" "Because I think you're here, because you finally realized that little family experiment was a mistake. Marcus is my son. Marcus is a complication, one that we can easily resolve." Grant felt his temper rising, but he forced himself to stay calm. He needed her confession. "What are you suggesting?" Victoria turned to face him, glass in hand. "Joint custody at best. The boy stays in Charlotte with his mother. You visit on weekends. Clean, simple, civilized. And if I want more than that..." Her smile turned sharp. "Then you'll discover that single mothers from small towns can be very vulnerable. Job losses, housing problems, mysterious illnesses. Life is unpredictable, Grant." There it was. The threat, clear and recorded. "You'd hurt a child to get what you want. I protect what's mine." She set down her glass and moved closer. "And you're mine, Grant. You always have been. Even when you were manipulating my medical records." Victoria didn't even flinch. "I saved you from making a terrible mistake. That woman would have trapped you with pregnancy, bled you dry, and disappeared. I protected your future. You stole my choice. I made the right choice. Look at you now, torn between your empire and some flight attendant's bastard child." Grant's hands clenched into fists. "Don't talk about my son that way. Your son, Victoria left. Grant, that boy will never fit into your world. Neither will she. You think you can play house in Wyoming forever? You think a woman like that can handle being a billionaire's wife? She's stronger than you think. Is she? Because when I'm done with her, she'll be broken, poor, and alone. Just like she was before you found her." Grant stared at this woman he'd once thought he loved. How had he ever been so blind? "You're insane. I am practicate. You have a choice, Grant. Come back to me, where you belong, or watch me destroy everything you think you care about. And if I choose them..." Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. "Then you'll lose everything. Your company, your reputation, your precious little family. I have enough dirt on your business practices to bury you. And that woman? That child? Accidents happen, Grant. Especially to people who don't matter." Grant had heard enough. More than enough. "Patricia was right," he said quietly. "You really are capable of anything." Victoria frowned. "What are you talking about?" Grant smiled for the first time in days. "I'm talking about the recording device that's been broadcasting this entire conversation to the FBI." Victoria went white. Game over. 6 months later, Grant stood in the backyard of their new house in Charlotte, watching Marcus play on the swing set he'd installed last week. Victoria was serving 5 years for fraud, conspiracy, and criminal threats. Dr. Richardson had lost his license and was facing his own legal battles. Grant's business empire had survived the scandal, stronger than ever now that he'd cleaned house and removed all of Victoria's allies. But the real victory was simpler than that. It was Marcus running to him every evening when he came home from work. It was Aaliyah humming in the kitchen while she cooked dinner. It was the life they were building together, one ordinary day at a time. "Daddy, watch this," Marcus called out, attempting a flip on the monkey bars. "Be careful, buddy," Grant called back, marveling at how natural the word daddy felt now. Aaliyah appeared beside him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Dinner's almost ready, but we need to talk first. Something in her tone made him turn to study her face. She looked nervous, excited, scared, all at once. What's wrong? She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. Nothing's wrong. Everything's perfect. It took him a moment to understand. When he did, his knees nearly gave out. Are you? 8 weeks, she whispered. I found out this morning. Grant stared at her, overwhelmed. A year ago, he believed he could never have children. Now he had Marcus, and soon he'd have another baby. With a woman he should have married 5 years ago. How do you feel about it? Aaliyah asked, searching his face. Instead of answering, he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like teenagers. I feel like the luckiest man alive, he said when he set her down. Even though this wasn't planned, especially because it wasn't planned. The best things in my life have been surprises. They watched Marcus play, both thinking about the future, about siblings and family dinners and Christmas mornings filled with chaos and joy. Grant, Aaliyah said quietly, are you sure this is what you want? Really sure? Because once we have 2 kids, what? You think I'll run away again? No, but your life is so complicated. The business, the travel, the pressure. Are you ready to be a full-time father to 2 children? Grant thought about his penthouse in Seattle, sitting empty except for security guards. About the corporate meetings that used to feel so important. About the empire he'd built that had felt meaningless until he had a family to share it with. I've been thinking about stepping back, he said. Promoting Patricia to CEO, becoming chairman instead. More strategic oversight, less day-to-day management. You do that. I'd do anything for this family. Aaliyah smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart during that summer 5 years ago. I love you, Grant Wexler. I love you too. Both of you. All 3 of you. He knelt down and kissed her stomach gently. Hey, little one, your big brother Marcus is going to be so excited to meet you. When he looked up, Aaliyah was crying happy tears. So, she said, when are we getting married? Grant grinned. How about tomorrow? Tomorrow. Why wait? We've already wasted 5 years. Marcus ran over, sensing something important was happening. What's going on? Grant scooped him up. How would you feel about being a big brother? Marcus's eyes went wide. Really? Really? And how would you feel about me marrying your mom? Yes, Marcus shouted. Then you'll stay forever. Forever and always, buddy. Forever and always. The wedding was small, perfect, and nothing like the elaborate affair Grant had once planned with Victoria. They got married in Aaliyah's parents' backyard in Charlotte, with Marcus as the ring bearer and about 50 of their closest friends and family members as witnesses. Aaliyah wore a simple white dress that made her glow, and Grant couldn't stop smiling. His best man was his business partner, James, who'd flown in from Seattle. Aaliyah's maid of honor was her sister, Keisha, who'd spent the morning crying happy tears and telling everyone who'd listened that she'd known Grant was the one from the beginning. But the real star of the show was Marcus, who took his ring-bearer duties so seriously that he practiced walking down the aisle 12 times before the ceremony started. Daddy, he whispered loudly during the vows. Are you gonna kiss Mommy now? The whole crowd laughed, and Grant knelt down to Marcus's level. What do you think, buddy? Should I kiss your mom? Yes, but not too long because it's gross. More laughter. Grant kissed Aaliyah quickly, then picked up Marcus and kissed his forehead too. Now we're really a family, he said. The reception was held at a local community center, with food catered by Aaliyah's favorite soul food restaurant and a DJ who played everything from classic Motown to current pop hits. Grant's corporate friends mingled awkwardly with Aaliyah's nursing school classmates and neighbors. But by the end of the night, everyone was dancing together and sharing stories about the couple. You know, James said, finding Grant during a quiet moment, I've never seen you this happy. I've never been this happy. Good. Because honestly, after Victoria, we were all worried you'd never trust anyone again. Grant watched Aaliyah dancing with Marcus, both of them laughing at something silly he'd said. I almost didn't. She saved me from myself. And you saved her too. How do you figure? Grant, that woman raised your son alone for 4 years, never knowing if you'd ever come back. She could have been bitter, could have turned Marcus against you. Instead, she kept believing in love. That takes strength most people don't have. Grant nodded, understanding. Aaliyah had every reason to hate him, but she'd chosen forgiveness instead. She'd chosen them. Later that night, after all the guests had gone home and Marcus was asleep in his new bedroom, Grant and Aaliyah sat on their front porch, still in their wedding clothes. "So, Mr. Wexler," Aaliyah said, "how does it feel to be a married man? Like everything finally makes sense," he said. "What about you, Mrs. Wexler?" Terrifying and perfect at the same time. Grant pulled her closer. "Any regrets?" "Just one." His heart skipped. "What's that? I wish we could have done this 5 years ago." "Hey." He tilted her chin up to look at him. "We weren't ready 5 years ago. You were 23, I was a mess. Marcus needed us to grow up first. You think everything happens for a reason? I think we make our own reasons. And our reason is in there sleeping with another one on the way." Aaliyah smiled and placed his hand on her stomach. "Speaking of which, we need to tell Marcus about the baby soon." "Tomorrow," Grant said. "Tonight, I just want to hold my wife. I like the sound of that." "Which part?" "All of it." 1 year later, Grant stood in the delivery room, holding his newborn daughter while Aaliyah rested and Marcus pressed his face against the glass window, making silly faces at his baby sister. "She's perfect," Grant whispered, studying the tiny fingers and impossibly small nose. "She looks just like you," Aaliyah said weakly, but she was smiling. "Poor kid, don't you dare. She's going to be beautiful." They decided to name her Grace, after Aaliyah's grandmother, who'd raised her when her parents divorced. It felt right. This little girl was Grace personified, a second chance at the family Grant thought he'd never have. Marcus burst into the room, followed by Keisha. "Can I hold her now?" he asked, practically bouncing with excitement. Grant carefully transferred the baby to Marcus's arms, making sure he was supported properly. Watching his son hold his daughter was a moment Grant knew he'd remember forever. Gresha Marcus whisperat. "I'm your big brother. I'm going to teach you everything I know." "That should be interesting," Aaliyah laughed. Yesterday, he tried to teach the neighbor's cat how to play basketball. The cat needed to learn, Marcus said seriously, never taking his eyes off Grace. Later, after visiting hours were over and Marcus had reluctantly gone home with Keisha, Grant and Aaliyah sat in the quiet hospital room, watching Grace sleep in her bassinet. "Can you believe this is our life?" Aaliyah asked. "Some days, no. It still feels too good to be true. Even the messy parts, the sleepless nights we're about to have, Marcus's soccer schedule that you'll have to memorize." Grant laughed, especially those parts. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. Asterisk, "Tokyo deal is waiting for your approval. Conference call scheduled for 6 a.m. Asterisk, without hesitation, Grant typed back. Asterisk, push everything to next week. "I'm taking paternity leave." Asterisk, big business decision? Aaliyah asked, having watched him type. "The biggest. I just decided that being your husband and their father is more important than any deal. You know I support your career, right? I don't want you to give up everything for us. I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing what matters." Grant moved his chair closer to her bed. 5 years ago, I thought success meant being the richest, most powerful man in the room. Now I know it means being the man my family can count on. And what about your company? The company will survive without me micromanaging every decision. But Marcus's childhood won't wait. Grace's first steps won't wait. Your dreams won't wait. My dreams. Nursing school. You never finished because you were too busy raising Marcus alone. Now you don't have to do anything alone. Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Good scared or bad scared? The best scared. The kind that means I finally have something worth losing." Grant kissed her forehead. "You'll never lose me again. I promise." Grace stirred in her sleep, making a tiny sound that was almost like a sigh. "I think she approves," Aaliyah whispered. "Of what?" "Of us. Of this crazy, beautiful life we've built." Grant looked at his sleeping daughter, thought about his son at home, probably planning elaborate big brother lessons, and felt his heart fill with a contentment he'd never known was possible. "Forever and always," he said. "Forever and always." Have you ever discovered that your biggest mistake led to your greatest blessing? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in second chances. What would you have done in Grant's situation? Let us know where you're watching from. Asterisk.